Chapter 1. I was 57 years old when I realized my own family didn't see me as a mother anymore. They saw me as a solution, a wallet, and a body that took up space. I had paid for their house, supported my son's business, raised their children when it was convenient, and stayed silent because I thought love meant endurance. Until one summer afternoon, when a nurse looked at my son and said he had failed to protect his own mother. That was the moment I stopped being quiet. My name is Lenora, and this is the story of how my family learned what happens when the woman they took for granted finally steps away. The first thing I noticed was the silence, not the quiet kind that settles in a house at night, but the tense kind that waits for you to say the wrong thing. I stood on the front step with my overnight bag biting into my palm, staring at the porch light I had replaced with Michael one summer when the moths were so thick they looked like ash in the air. The light was newer now, brighter, colder, and it made the paint on the door look less like the warm cream we chose and more like something bleached. The door opened a few inches and then wider. Grant was there, my son, 41 years old, taller than his father, with the same habit of rubbing the back of his neck when he did not know what to do with his hands. "Hi, Mom," he said, then leaned in and hugged me quickly like he had to remember the steps. His shirt smelled faintly of laundry detergent and coffee. For a second, I let myself breathe in that familiar combination and pretend it meant comfort. Paige appeared behind him, one hand on the edge of the doorframe. She was 39, beautifully put together, even at 8 in the morning, hair-smooth earrings that caught the porch light like little flashes. "Morning, Lenora," she said. Her smile reached her lips but did not travel any farther. I stepped inside, and the air felt different. Not dirty, not terrible, just crowded with things that did not belong to me. Shoes piled near the entry, a stack of unopened packages leaning against the wall, a plastic bin of toys half under a bench that used to hold my gardening gloves. I had once kept this hallway clear enough for a person to walk through without turning sideways. Now I had to angle my shoulder like I was slipping into a movie theater row. I told myself not to judge. People have busy lives. People get tired. People let things slide. Still, my stomach tightened. Grant took my bag without asking and set it down by the stairs. Paige walked ahead, already talking about the day, her voice quick and efficient. "We have a lot going on this week," she said. "The kids have school, Grant has meetings, and I have appointments. We will figure out a routine." Routine, like I was a new appliance. I nodded, keeping my face soft. I had learned over decades of marriage and motherhood and office meetings that tone mattered as much as words. If I sounded too needy, people pulled away. If I sounded too capable, people assumed I did not need anything at all. A few months ago, I had been sitting in a hospital chair beside Michael's bed, watching the rise and fall of his breathing slow, until it did not rise again. Late last year, December, the snow had been heavy, and the world had felt like it was holding its breath. After the funeral, people brought casseroles and sympathy cards and used careful voices around me, like grief was a fragile glass that might shatter if they touched it wrong. Then the casseroles stopped. The cards stopped. The phone calls slowed down. The world started moving again, and I was still standing in place. Grant had called 2 weeks later. "We should have you stay with us for a bit," he said. "Dad would have wanted that." Michael had said something similar in the last clear conversation we had. "Take care of her," he told Grant, his voice rough and thin. "Promise me." Grant had promised. I had heard it. I had believed it. I also had my own place, a small condo in a quiet building near the Riverwalk, the one Michael and I bought when Grant got married back in 2014. We told ourselves we were giving the young couple room to grow, and we genuinely meant it. We moved our lives into fewer rooms, fewer closets, fewer memories. I let myself think it was a gentle transition, a way of making life simpler as we got older. But now I was here, stepping carefully around piles of shoes in the house that still held my fingerprints under the paint. Paige led me toward the kitchen, and the smell of something sweet, maybe a candle, floated over the scent of yesterday's dinner. The counters were crowded with school papers, a blender, 2 water bottles, a stack of mail, and a bowl of fruit that had started to soften in places. I noticed it all without meaning to. My mind cataloged clutter the way it used to catalog numbers. I used to manage our family's trust accounts. Michael called it my second language, the one I spoke with spreadsheets and signatures. I was not a banker in a fancy skyscraper or a stock trader on television, but I knew what it meant to keep records clean. I knew what it meant to keep things in their place, because if you did not, something important got lost. Paige opened a drawer, pulled out a mug, and handed it to me. "Coffee?" she asked. "Yes, thank you," I said. Grant moved to the coffee maker and started fussing with it like he did not know where anything was. Paige watched him for a moment, then turned to me. "The guest room is not really set up," she said. I waited, still holding the mug with both hands, feeling the warmth but not drinking. "We can put you in the downstairs room for now," she continued. "It is mostly the kids' playroom, but we can clear a space. Mostly. For now. Clear a space." The words landed like small, sharp pebbles. Grant glanced over and I saw the apology in his eyes before he looked away. He said, "We just need a little time to rearrange things." "It is fine," I heard myself say. "I am fine." The room she led me to had a pull-out couch with a thin mattress, a shelf of board games, and a toy kitchen with plastic food scattered across the rug. A small desk in the corner was stacked with art supplies and sticker books. There was no lamp on the side table, no empty drawer, no place that felt like mine. Paige gestured toward the couch. "You can set your things there. The kids usually come down here after dinner, but we will tell them to keep it quiet." I tried to smile. "I do not want to disrupt anyone." Grant cleared his throat. "Mom, you are not disrupting. You are family." Family. It should have felt like an anchor. Instead, it sounded like a rule that could be bent. Upstairs, I heard footsteps, then the thunder of small bodies. Daniel, Sophie, and Lucas came rushing down the stairs, voices overlapping. Grandma Daniel shouted, and he wrapped his arms around my waist with a force that nearly made me lose my balance. Sophie reached for my hand, and Lucas bounced on his toes like he could not decide whether to hug me or run away again. Their warmth hit me hard. I blinked, swallowing the sudden sting behind my eyes. "Hey," I said softly. "I missed you." Paige's voice sharpened, quick and sweet at the same time. "Shoes off, guys. And do not jump on Grandma." The kids obeyed mostly. They stared at my bag, then at the couch, then at me. "Are you staying here?" Daniel asked. For a little while, I said. Sophie's face lit up. "Yes." Grant smiled at them, a real smile this time, and for a moment the house felt like it might settle. Like maybe we could build something gentler here. Then Paige checked her watch. "Okay, we have to move. Daniel, your bus. Sophie, your backpack. Lucas, come on, buddy." She spoke to them like she was sorting objects into the right bins. Efficient. Controlled. No room for softness. Grant leaned toward me as the kids raced back upstairs. "We will talk tonight, okay? Make a plan." I nodded, even though I had not asked for a plan. I had asked for a place where I did not feel like a problem to be solved. They left in a rush, Paige's car backing out of the driveway, Grant's footsteps fading behind her. The house went quiet again, and I was alone in the playroom with my bag and a couch that smelled faintly of crayons and old popcorn. I walked back to the hallway and looked up the stairs. The same stairs where Grant used to sit as a teenager, sulking because we would not let him borrow the car. The railing had been repainted. The framed photos on the wall were mostly new, the kids at birthdays and school events, but one picture remained from before Grant and Michael standing in the backyard, both of them squinting into the sun. I touched the edge of the frame just for a second and pulled my hand back like I had been caught doing something wrong. I told myself this was temporary. I told myself grief made everything feel sharper. I told myself that if I just stayed calm and useful and quiet, the edges would soften. Still, as I carried my bag back to the playroom and set it on the couch, a thought pressed against my chest, heavy and unwelcome. I did not feel like a mother in this house. I did not feel like a guest either. I felt like something they had agreed to keep. Chapter 2. The first few weeks, I told myself it was just an adjustment grief and new routines rubbing against each other until they fit. By the second month, I could predict the shape of my days the way I used to predict cash flow. Not because anyone sat me down and asked for help, but because the house moved around me as if I were already assigned. It started small. Paige would sigh at the sink after dinner, glance at the dishes, then glance at her phone. "I should really clean up," she would say, "but I have to answer a few messages for tomorrow." I would hear myself answer, "I can do it. Go ahead." Grant would be in the living room with his laptop open, nodding at whatever was on the screen, the muscles in his jaw tight. He would look relieved when he heard me. "Thanks, Mom," he would say, already turning back to his work. And then it was done. One more thing quietly moved from their plate onto mine. By the time fall settled in, it was not just dishes. It was breakfasts packed into little containers, shoes lined up by the door, lunches checked for peanut butter because Sophie's class had a rule, and Lucas's jacket zipped because he hated the feel of the zipper against his chin. No one asked me to take over. They simply started living as if I had. At 6:30 in the morning, Paige would come downstairs in leggings and a blazer, hair still damp, and say, "I have a client at 8. Can you do drop-off today?" Not "can you really?" More like "this is what is happening." I would say yes because saying no felt like lighting a match inside a room already full of smoke. Daniel would sit at the counter scrolling on his phone shoulders, hunched like a grown man pretending he was not listening. Sophie would swing her feet under the stool and ask if I could braid her hair again. Lucas would press his face into my side and whisper, "I want you to take me, Grandma." The kids made it easy to say yes. That was the part that stung the most. My love for them was real, warm, uncomplicated. The rest was a series of small transactions disguised as family. One afternoon in October, Paige slid a list across the counter while I was chopping carrots. "Can you make sure they have clean uniforms for Spirit Day?" she said. "And Daniel needs his permission slip signed. Also, if you have time, could you pick up some groceries? I put it in the app." I looked at the list, then at her. "Do you want me to—" I started. Paige's smile snapped into place. "I just have so much on my plate. You know how it is." I did know. I had worked and raised a child and managed a house and cared for a sick husband. I knew what it was to carry too much. The difference was that I never handed it off with a smile and called it normal. Grant walked in while Paige was talking and gave me a look, half apology, half relief. "Mom's great at that stuff," he said. "She likes to stay busy." I almost laughed. It was so neat how he made my compliance sound like a preference. I kept chopping. The knife made soft, steady sounds against the cutting board. I told myself I was choosing this. I told myself my silence was kindness. But kindness should not make you feel smaller. The first time I realized they were planning their lives without me, it was about the house itself. Grant came home one evening with a folder tucked under his arm, the kind of folder you get when you have been to a contractor or a bank. Paige was at the kitchen island with her laptop open. She looked up and her eyes lit in a way I had not seen since I moved in. "Did you get it?" she asked. Grant tapped the folder. "Yeah. He said we can start in November if we put down a deposit this week. Start what I asked, my voice light like I had just wandered into someone else's conversation by accident." Paige blinked, then recovered. "Oh, sorry. We are finally redoing the downstairs. Opening up the wall, adding built-ins, maybe new flooring." Grant added, "It will look great. More space for the kids. And more modern." I stood there with my hands still wet from washing lettuce water dripping onto the floor. "That sounds like a big project," I said. Paige tilted her head. "It is, but it is worth it." Then she said something that made my stomach drop. "We are thinking we will extend the downstairs bedroom too, the one you are in, so it can be more of an actual suite. Better for resale. The one you are in, not your room, not your space. Just the one you are in like a coat hung on a hook until spring." I waited for someone to ask what I thought because the plan included ripping apart the only place I slept in their house. No one did. Grant glanced toward me, then away. "We will just need you to stay somewhere else for a couple weeks while they do the floors," he said. "Maybe your condo. My condo. The place I still paid for. The place I had left because my husband asked his son to take care of me. Paige smiled brightly. It will be fine, and when it is done, it will be so much nicer for you too. That was the moment I felt the shift clean and undeniable. They were not arranging this house around me. They were arranging me around this house. Later that night, I called my cousin Marilyn mostly because I needed to hear a voice that did not live under this roof. Marilyn answered on the second ring. "Honey, how are you holding up?" I hesitated, then told her about the remodel, about being moved like furniture. Marilyn clicked her tongue. "They are young. They do not think. You cannot take everything personally." "It does not feel personal," I said. "It feels like I do not exist." Marilyn sighed. "Lenora, you have to pick your battles. You do not want to lose your son over pride." Pride. That word always did so much work in families. It turned self-respect into stubbornness. It turned boundaries into selfishness. I stared at the wall while she talked. The paint in the playroom was scuffed where Lucas had pushed toy trucks against it. I had scrubbed it last week. "I am not trying to fight," I said quietly. "Then do not," Marilyn replied. "Be the bigger person. Mothers endure. That is what we do." After I hung up, I sat on the edge of the pull-out couch and listened to the house settle. A pipe knocked somewhere. The refrigerator hummed. Upstairs, a child coughed in sleep. I could endure. I had endured plenty. But the question that kept circling was why I was the only one expected to. In December, I heard the conversation that made everything click into place. It happened on a Saturday morning when Paige thought I was in the laundry room. I had gone downstairs to switch a load and came back up the basement steps quietly because I did not want to wake Lucas, who had fallen asleep on the couch. Paige and Grant were in the kitchen. Their voices were low tight. Paige said, "I am just saying, if we are putting money into the remodel, we need to be on the same page. I do not want her thinking she has any say." Grant answered, "She is not going to say anything." Paige made a small laugh. "Of course she is not. She does not have to. She just stands there with that look like we are doing something wrong." Grant said, "We are not doing anything wrong. This is our house." Paige lowered her voice further. "And our money. I am the one bringing in clients. I am the one keeping us afloat while you build your little business. So yes, I get to decide what we do with our money." Grant's chair scraped. His voice sharpened. "Your clients are not paying for everything." "You know that." Paige snapped. "Then where is it coming from?" "Grant, because it is not from your company. You barely broke even last quarter." There was a pause. Then Grant said, "It comes in. That is all you need to know." Paige scoffed. "You mean the help? Your mom's help, like it is just part of the weather." Grant said, "She offered. She wants to feel useful. It is not like she needs it. My help, my money." Spoken about like a leak in the roof they had gotten used to, inconvenient but expected. I stood on the stairs, one hand on the railing, heart thudding in my throat. Not because I was shocked that I had been helping them. I knew I had. I had been sending Grant money regularly since he started talking about building his shipping business, the one he was so proud of, the one he named Harbor Line Logistics, like he was already bigger than he was. What shocked me was how completely they had rewritten the story in their heads. Paige believed she was the provider. Grant believed my support was permanent. Neither of them spoke like they were grateful. They spoke like they were entitled. I took a slow breath and stepped back down one stair so the wood would not creak. Then another. I moved carefully like the house itself might betray me. Back in the basement, I stood in front of the washing machine and watched it spin. Colors blurred behind the glass, the same shirts and socks and pajamas tumbling over and over. The motion made me dizzy. I could have confronted them right then. I could have marched upstairs and demanded respect, demanded thanks, demanded a place at the table. But I knew something from years of watching people behave when they felt cornered. If I spoke too soon, they would make me the problem. So I stayed quiet. Not the quiet of surrender, the quiet of someone finally paying attention. Chapter 3. I carried that silence with me into the summer like a coin in my pocket. I kept rubbing between my fingers, proof that I was finally awake. By June of 2024, the house had started to run on me the way a machine runs on electricity. If I cooked, everyone ate. If I packed, everyone had what they needed. If I remembered, everyone showed up on time. And if I stopped, things did not simply get messy, they fell apart. That should have made me feel powerful. Instead, it made me feel trapped. The trip was Blair's idea, at least that is how she presented it. A family getaway to Orlando, a few days in the heat and bright colors, a reset. Drew nodded along like he always did when she talked about plans, eyes half on his phone, half on the ceiling, as if agreement was something that happened to him rather than something he chose. I was rinsing strawberries at the sink when I heard them talking about it. "We should go before school starts," Blair said. "Sure," Drew replied. "We can do it." Blair's voice turned lighter, almost playful. "The kids will love it, and it will be good for us. We have been under so much stress." I set the colander down and waited. If they wanted me included, they would say it. They did not. Later that evening, my grandson Mason, 12, and always watching more than he let on, slipped into the downstairs room, where I slept on the pull-out couch. "Grandma, are we going on a trip?" he asked. His sister, Ivy, 9, appeared behind him, hair still damp from her shower. "Mom said Orlando," Ivy said, eyes wide. "Is it true?" My youngest, Theo, 6, bounced in the doorway, already excited about something he did not understand. "Orlando has the big rides," he said. I forced a smile that felt like it belonged on someone else's face. "Sounds like it," I said. Mason's brow pinched. "Are you coming?" I hesitated. The truth was, I had not been invited. The truth was, I could already picture Blair's tight smile and the way she would talk about budgets and space and schedules. "I do not know yet," I said softly. Ivy stepped closer and took my hand. "Please come. It will be boring without you." Theo wrapped his arms around my leg. "You have to come. You make it fun." My chest tightened. Children ask for love the way they ask for water. Simple, honest, without shame. Adults twist love into a negotiation. The next morning, I brought it up while Blair was packing lunches at the counter. Drew sat at the island, scrolling through emails, tapping his foot. "Your mom said you are planning Orlando," I said. I kept my voice even gentle, like I was asking about the weather. Blair did not look up. "Yeah, just a few days." I waited. Drew finally glanced at me, and I watched him decide whether to speak. "Mom," he started, then stopped. Blair placed the peanut-free snack packs into a bag with sharp little movements. "It is going to be pretty expensive," she said. 3 kids' tickets hotel. We are trying to keep it reasonable." "I understand," I said. "I was not asking you to pay for me." Blair looked up then, and her eyes flicked across my face as if she was checking for traps. "If you want to come," she said, "you can, but you will need to cover your part. And honestly, we will need help with the kids. It is a lot to manage." Drew nodded like it was a fair exchange. "She is great with them," he said. "They listen to her." It landed exactly where Blair intended. Not, "You are welcome. You are useful." "I can pay for myself," I said. My voice sounded steady, but my stomach felt hollow. Blair smiled, relieved. "Great. Then it will work." That evening, I booked my own flight. Not because I wanted to see Orlando. I wanted to protect my relationship with my grandchildren. I wanted to keep being the soft place they could land, even if I was sleeping on a couch in a house that no longer felt like mine. We left in late July. The airport was crowded and loud, families in matching shirts, kids crying, parents bargaining with snacks and promises. Blair moved through the chaos like a general snapping instructions. "Mason, keep your shoes on. Ivy, do not put your hands on that. Theo, stay close to me." Drew carried the backpack and looked tired before the trip even started. I followed behind with a tote bag full of things no one else had thought about. Band-Aids, water bottles, wipes, extra socks. The same quiet labor, just in a different setting. At the hotel, Blair handed me a key card. "You are in the room with the kids," she said. I looked at her. "All of them." "It makes sense," she replied quickly. "You go to bed early, they go to bed early. Drew and I need to actually sleep." Drew avoided my eyes. He lifted the suitcase onto the luggage rack like the metal frame was suddenly fascinating. Mason caught my expression. "It is fine," he whispered as we walked down the hallway. "I will help." My heart broke in a way it had not the day I buried my husband. Grief was one kind of pain. Watching a child learn responsibility because adults refused it was another. The first day at the park, the heat hit like a hand across the face. Florida in July did not care about anyone's plans. The air clung to your skin, thick and wet, and every line for every ride felt like standing inside a slow-moving oven. By noon, my back ached. Theo wanted to be carried. Ivy complained her shoes hurt. Mason tried to act tough, jaw-clenched eyes scanning the crowd. I said it carefully, softly, so it would not sound like an inconvenience. "Maybe we should sit for a bit, get some water." Blair sighed, already irritated. "We just sat," she said. "We are not even halfway through the list." "It has been 2 hours," I replied. Drew looked at his phone. "We should keep moving. We paid a lot for this." It was not just money they were protecting. It was the fantasy of a perfect vacation, the kind of story you post online, bright smiles and no cracks. I kept walking. An hour later, Theo's face was red and shiny. He leaned into my side, sluggish now the way children get when they are past the point of complaining. "I feel yucky," he murmured. "We should take him inside," I said. Blair's voice sharpened. "He is fine. He just wants attention." Theo's head dropped onto my hip. His skin felt too hot through his shirt. "Drew," I said louder. "Feel him. He is burning up." Drew finally put his hand on Theo's forehead. His expression changed, a flicker of alarm, then annoyance, as if worry was an inconvenience too. "Okay," he said. "We can go to the first aid station." Blair threw her hands up. "Great! There goes the afternoon." I did not respond. My mouth had gone dry. My heart was thumping in my throat. The first aid room was air-conditioned and smelled faintly of antiseptic. A staff member in a polo shirt and a nurse with a calm voice took Theo's temperature, gave him electrolyte pops, pressed cool cloths against his neck. The nurse looked at Drew and Blair not unkindly, but directly. "He is showing signs of heat exhaustion," she said. "Kids can crash fast in this weather. He should be in shade sipping water, not running around." Blair crossed her arms. "We gave him water." "Not enough," the nurse replied, "and not steadily. You cannot wait until they are thirsty." Drew shifted his weight. "We did not realize it was that bad." The nurse's eyes moved past them to me and softened slightly, like she could see I had been carrying more than a tote bag. Then she looked back at Drew. "Also," she said, "make sure your older family members are taking breaks too. Heat affects adults differently, especially seniors. You need to plan for that." "Senior." The word did not offend me. It was simply true. What stung was the way Drew's shoulders tightened, as if the nurse had accused him of something. "We are fine," Blair said quickly. "She is fine." She did not say my name. She did not look at me. She spoke about me like I was another child in the group, another thing to manage. When we left the first aid station, Blair walked ahead brisk and angry the way people walk when they feel embarrassed and want to escape it. Drew followed carrying Theo, now jaw clenched. I trailed behind with Mason and Ivy. Mason stayed close, scanning me the way he had been scanning the crowd. "You okay, Grandma?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "I am fine." But I was not fine. My body felt heavy, and my mind felt sharper than it had in months. Back at the hotel that night, Theo fell asleep early, and Ivy curled up beside him. Mason lay on the other bed, staring at the ceiling, too old to sleep easily, too young to feel safe naming what he had seen. In the dim light, I listened to Drew and Blair arguing in the hallway outside our door, voices low, strained. "That nurse made us look like monsters," Blair hissed. Drew answered, "We should have slowed down. He was overheating." Blair scoffed. "We paid for this trip. We cannot waste it because everyone needs constant breaks." Everyone. The kids. Me. Whoever was not Blair. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my hands. They looked older than they used to, skin thinner, veins more visible. These hands had held my husband's when he could no longer hold his own cup. These hands had signed documents, balanced accounts, kept a life running. And yet here in this room, I was treated like extra luggage. The realization came quietly, not like lightning, more like a door closing. If I became a little weaker, a little slower, a little more inconvenient, their priority would not be my safety. It would be their schedule. I stayed awake long after the children's breathing settled into steady rhythms, staring at the dark, feeling something inside me harden into clarity. I did not owe anyone my dignity at the price of my own well-being. Chapter 4. The decision settled in my body like a steady heartbeat, quiet, but undeniable. We flew back from Orlando with Theo finally smiling again, his cheeks less flushed, his little hand wrapped around my finger as if he could anchor himself to me. Blair stayed clipped and efficient through the airport, already irritated by the delays and the crowds. Drew walked beside her, carrying bags, eyes dull with exhaustion, acting like the trip had been something that happened to him, not something he chose. Back home in North Carolina, the air felt lighter even in the thick August humidity. The moment I stepped into my condo, the one-bedroom place I had kept all along, I took a deep breath and realized I had not truly exhaled in months. My own space smelled like lemon cleaner and the faint lavender soap I bought because I liked it, not because anyone else demanded it. I set my suitcase down, and the silence there felt kind. I did not call Drew and Blair that night. I did not text. I did not explain. I showered, made tea, and sat at my small table by the window. I watched the sun sink behind the trees and let my thoughts line up one after another like paperwork on a desk. The next morning, I opened my laptop and logged into the account I had been using for years, the one Drew pretended not to know existed. Family support, I had called it in my own head. A monthly transfer to help him keep his small logistics company afloat, Ridgeline Freight, the dream he insisted would take off once he had the right truck, the right contract, the right break. It was not a fortune, not some dramatic movie number. It was enough to cover what his revenue did, not the quiet gap between what he wanted his life to look like and what it actually produced. I stared at the scheduled payment, the next one set for the first of the month. My finger hovered over the mouse. For a brief moment, I felt the old reflex, the one that said, mothers fix things, mothers smooth things over. Mothers carry the weight so no one else has to feel it. Then I remembered the first aid nurse, the way she looked at Drew when she said, "You have to plan for your older family members too." I remembered Blair saying she is fine without even looking at me. I clicked cancel. My heart raced, not from fear of them, but from the unfamiliar sensation of choosing myself without permission. I called Drew later that afternoon. He answered on the third ring. "Hey, Mom," he said, voice cautious. "Everything okay?" "It is," I replied. "I am back home." A pause. "Good," he said. "The kids were asking about you. Blair has been, stressed." I kept my voice calm. "I am not coming back to stay at the house." His breath caught. "What do you mean?" "I mean I am staying in my condo," I said. "I will visit the kids, but I am not moving back in." He tried to laugh like it was a misunderstanding. "Mom, come on. It was just a rough trip. Blair did not mean anything." I waited, letting the silence do its work. He filled it quickly. "We need you okay. We have a lot going on. The remodel. School starts soon. The after-school stuff. You cannot just pull away." Pull away? Like I was a plug he depended on. "I can," I said. "And I am." His voice sharpened. "So this is because of Orlando?" "It is because of everything," I replied. Orlando just made it clear. He exhaled hard. Blair is going to freak out. I did not rise to it. That is not mine to manage. Another pause, thicker this time. Mom, he said, slower, careful. We should talk about finances then, because you know the business relies on that help right now. There it was, the real reason his voice had changed. I know, I said. That is why I am telling you now. I am not continuing the monthly support. His words came fast. You cannot do that. You said you would help until I got stable. I said I would help while you built something sustainable, I replied. Those are not the same thing. He sounded offended, as if I had betrayed him. So you are punishing me. I am stepping back, I said. You are an adult. He started to protest again, but I cut him off, still calm. I am not arguing. I wanted you to know. That is all. I ended the call with my hands trembling, not because I doubted the choice, but because I knew what would come next. 2 days later, Blair called. I watched her name flash on my phone, and I felt my stomach tighten. I answered anyway. Hi, Blair. Her voice was sweet in that sharp way I had learned to recognize. Lenora, I heard you are upset. I am not upset, I said. I am making a change. You are making things really hard for us, she replied. Drew is already under pressure and the kids are confused. You disappearing is not fair. I did not disappear, I said. I told Drew I will visit. I just will not live in the house. She gave a short laugh. You are acting like we did something to you. I let the silence stretch. Then she went for what she believed was leverage. You know that house is the kids' home. You cannot just decide to take support away and destabilize them. My voice stayed even. The kids will be okay. They have their parents. Her sweetness dropped. Do not pretend you are some victim here. We took you in. We gave you a place. I felt a strange, clean clarity. You gave me a pull-out couch in a playroom. Her inhale was sharp. It was temporary. So was my help, I said. She went quiet, and when she spoke again, her tone had changed, more calculating. Are you threatening us? She asked. No, I replied. I am informing you. She tried again, lower, like we were sharing a secret. Lenora, be reasonable. Drew told me you were going to make a mess with the house, like you think you can just sell it out from under us. My pulse jumped, but my voice did not. Who told you that? Drew did, she said quickly. And he is right, you cannot. That is our home. I could almost hear her belief, solid as concrete, built on assumptions she had never questioned. I did not correct her right then. I did not need to. I was not interested in winning a phone argument. I was interested in facts. That afternoon, I called Alicia Tran, a realtor I had met years ago through a neighbor. Alicia had a warm voice and the kind of directness I appreciated. Lenora, it has been a while, she said. How can I help? I want to get an estimate on a property, I replied. A house in Cary. Alicia did not ask why she asked for the address and the condition. I told her the truth as gently as I could. The house had been lived in hard. It would need repairs, and it would sell anyway because everything sells when the schools are good and the market is hungry. We can do a walkthrough this week, Alicia said. When I hung up, my hands were steady. My mind was already moving ahead through the steps. Gather documents, confirm title, meet with counsel, do it cleanly. I did not tell Drew and Blair about the appointment. Not yet. 2 nights later, Drew showed up at my condo unannounced. I opened the door and found him standing there with his shoulders tense, eyes red like he had not slept. We need to talk, he said. I stepped aside and let him in. He looked around as if he had forgotten this place existed. The clean counters, the quiet, the absence of chaos. He sat on my couch and leaned forward, elbows on knees. Mom, what is happening? He asked. Blair says you are talking to a realtor. I kept my voice calm. I am. His eyes widened. You cannot sell the house. I waited. He pushed on. That is our family home. That is where the kids live. I have put money into it. I pay the mortgage." I looked at him, letting him hear himself. "Drew," I said softly, "what makes you think you own it?" His jaw clenched. "Dad wanted it for me. You and Dad moved out. You gave it to us. Everyone knows that." I nodded slowly. "Everyone believes a lot of things." His voice rose. "So what, you are going to throw us out because Blair annoyed you on vacation?" "It is not about vacation," I said. "It is about the way you both treated me long before that." He stood up, pacing now, anger sharpening into panic. "This is insane. You are not thinking straight." I stayed seated. "I am thinking very clearly." He stopped and faced me. "I will talk to a lawyer," he said like it was a threat. I met his eyes. "You should." He blinked, thrown off by my lack of fear. For 3 days after that, I heard nothing. No calls, no texts. I imagined Drew and Blair in their kitchen, whispering, furious, convinced they could intimidate me back into my old role. I imagined them telling each other stories where I was irrational and cruel, because that made it easier than admitting they had built their comfort on my silence. On the 4th day, my phone rang. Drew's name again. I answered. His voice was quieter, but it was tight with disbelief. "Mom," he said, "the attorney says the deed is in your name." I did not say anything. He continued, stumbling over the words. "He said there was never a transfer, not to me, not to Blair, nothing. He said legally I do not own it." I let a breath out slowly, feeling something settle in place. "That is correct," I said, his voice cracked with frustration. "Why would you do that? Why would you let me think it was mine?" "I never told you it was," I replied. "You assumed." He sounded like he was trying to grab control of the narrative again. "But, Mom, you cannot just sell it." "The kids. Our lives." "I can," I said gently, "and I will do it properly. You will have time to plan. I am not trying to hurt the children." "You are hurting us," he snapped. I kept my tone steady. "I am setting a boundary." After the call, I sat at my table and stared out the window. My tea had gone cold. Outside, a couple walked their dog along the sidewalk, laughing about something small. The world kept moving, indifferent to the drama inside my family. I had one more meeting to take, and then I would decide the timeline, not in anger, not for revenge, just because I was done carrying a life that was never treated as mine. Chapter 5. The next morning felt almost too ordinary for the kind of line I had crossed, coffee cooling in my mug, sunlight crawling across the kitchen tile, my phone sitting face down like it might bite. For weeks after I cut off the money, I heard less and less from my son. Not because life suddenly got peaceful for him, but because there was nothing left to negotiate. When my support stopped, the noise stopped too. That was the first truth I had to swallow. I was not a person they missed. I was a solution they missed. The company was the first thing to wobble. It had always been propped up by confidence and credit, the kind of confidence that sounds like a plan when someone else is paying for the mistakes. Ridgeway Transport, LLC, looked impressive on paper. A neat logo, a clean website, a few big contracts my son liked to name drop at family gatherings. But I had seen the invoices. I had seen the way he rushed decisions to look decisive. I had seen the way my daughter-in-law treated revenue like a personality trait. Once my transfers stopped, late fees stopped being an abstract concept. Vendors wanted payment on delivery, not promises. The bank wanted real numbers, not optimism. Payroll became a weekly fire drill. He called me one afternoon, voice tight, like he was trying not to sound scared. "Mom, I just need a little bridge. 2 months. That is all. We will stabilize, and then you will never hear about it again." I stared at the bowl of apples on my counter, the kind of domestic still life that used to make me feel safe. I said I am not doing that. There was a long silence. Then the tone shifted, the old one, the one that assumed I would fold if he pressed the right button. "So you are just going to watch us drown?" I said, "I am going to watch you swim. There is a difference." He exhaled sharp. "You do not understand what it is like. I have families depending on me." I said, "I understand exactly what it is like. That is why I am not funding chaos anymore." He tried again, softer this time. "Jenna is freaking out. The kids are stressed. This is not the time to prove a point." I felt something rise in my chest. Not rage, not triumph, just a tired clarity. I said, "This is not a point. This is my life." He hung up. 2 days later, my daughter-in-law called. She did not start with hello. She started with accusation. "You promised you would be here for family." I sat down at my kitchen table because my knees suddenly felt older than they were. I said, "I have been here. I have been here the whole time." She laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Being here is not the same as helping. We are drowning. Mark is working non-stop. The kids are falling apart. And you are sitting there in your little quiet place acting like you are better than us." I could picture her pacing phone pressed to her ear, anger doing the work of fear. I said, "I am not better than you. I am just done being your safety net." She snapped back. "So what do you want? An apology, a thank you note, a parade?" I closed my eyes and let myself remember the way she looked at me in that house, the little flicker of irritation every time I existed in the same room. I said I wanted respect. I wanted a plan. I wanted a family that cared if I was okay. I wanted a room that was mine and a voice that mattered. I did not get any of that. Her breath hitched, and for a second I thought she might soften. Then she did what she always did. She doubled down. We were under pressure. "You know how hard it is to raise kids. You know how expensive everything is." I said, "Yes, I know." And I still did it without making my mother feel like a burden. That landed. It landed so hard the line went quiet. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller but still sharp. "So you are just going to abandon your grandchildren too?" That was the moment I realized how often they used the children as a lever, not a love. I said, "I am not abandoning them. I am separating money from love. If you cannot tell the difference, that is not my failure." She called me cold, then she cried, then she hung up. After that, the unraveling did not happen like a movie. There was no single dramatic collapse. It was slower, messier, more realistic. A contract that did not renew. A truck that sat in the shop too long because the repair deposit was not paid. A client who stopped answering emails. A bank officer who started speaking in polite warnings. And then the cracks in their marriage started showing, not because I did anything to them, but because when the cushion disappeared, they finally had to feel the floor. My son stopped sleeping. I could hear it in his voice when he called the thin edge of panic under the words. Jenna started blaming him for choices she had cheered for a year earlier. He blamed her for spending. She blamed him for borrowing. It went in circles until it turned into silence. The kind of silence that sits at the dinner table between two people who cannot stand to admit they are afraid. One evening, my oldest grandchild called me from my son's phone. His voice was careful, like he was asking permission to be a kid. "Grandma, are you mad at Dad?" I swallowed and looked out my window at a row of trees that had nothing to do with their chaos. I said, "I am not mad at him. I am sad. And I am steady." He asked, "Are we going to lose the house?" I wanted to lie. I wanted to wrap him in comfort and tell him everything would be fine. But I had learned something about kids. They can feel a lie even when you decorate it. I said, "I do not know, but I know this. You are not responsible for adult decisions, and you are allowed to be scared and still keep going." He was quiet. Then he said, "Mom and Dad fight a lot now." I said, "I am sorry you have to hear that. When it happens, go to your room, put on music, and remember that grown-ups are not always as grown as they look." He let out a little breath that sounded like relief. "Can you come visit?" I did not say yes immediately. Not because I did not want to, but because I was learning to protect my own peace. I said, "I can meet you at the park on Saturday for a couple hours. You can bring your brother and sister. If Mom and Dad want to talk to me, they can email me and we will set a time. No surprises." He said, "Okay. I love you." I said, "I love you too." That Saturday, I met them at a public park, not their living room, not the house that had made me feel like an unwanted piece of furniture. The kids ran to me like nothing had changed because to them, love was still simple. They begged for snacks, they argued over the swings they told me about school, about a spelling test, about a friend who was mean at recess. At one point, my middle grandchild asked, "Why do you not live with us anymore?" I crouched down so we were eye level. I said, "Because my home is where I can take care of myself. And when I take care of myself, I can love you better." She frowned, then accepted it in the way children sometimes accept truths adults complicate. "Okay," she said, and then she asked if I could watch her do a cartwheel. I clapped when she landed it, and something in my chest loosened. Over the next few months, the kids changed in small ways. They started packing their own backpacks because their parents were too distracted. They started helping with dishes because no one else was. They learned that entitlement does not feed you, and that complaining does not fix a problem. It was not fair that they had to grow up faster. But I saw something else too. They were learning responsibility in a way my son never had to because I had always smoothed the road for him. And my son slowly, painfully began to face the consequences of the life he had been living on borrowed support. One night he called me again. No anger this time, just exhaustion. "Mom, I was wrong about some things. I did not rush to comfort him. I did not rush to punish him either. I let the silence sit long enough for him to feel his own words. He said, 'I thought you would always catch us.' I said, 'I did catch you, for too long, and it made you believe falling was impossible.' He whispered, 'Jenna wants to move in with her sister for a while.' I said, 'I am sorry.' He said, 'Do you think we are going to make it?' I could have told him what to do. I could have stepped back into the role of manager, fixer, rescuer. But I did not. I said, 'I think you have to stop building your life on what you can take and start building it on what you can hold.' He did not argue. He just breathed. After that call, I sat alone in my quiet home, the one I chose, and I finally understood something that had been aching in me for years. I did not leave my son. I stopped shielding him. I stopped absorbing the consequences of choices I did not make. And karma, the kind that actually means something, is not cruelty. It is accuracy. It is life returning the bill to the person who ordered the meal. My days became smaller, calmer. Morning walks, simple dinners, a book by the window, occasional Saturdays with the kids at the park or the library. I did not celebrate the unraveling. I did not gloat. I did not announce victory. I just kept my dignity, quietly, fully, like it had always belonged to me. And if you are listening to this, maybe you know that fear too. The fear that one day you will be seen as a burden, a problem to manage a body taking up space. If you have ever felt that in your own home, I want to leave you with the only question that mattered in the end. If you were in my place, would you have left sooner or would you have stayed longer? Tell me in the comments what you would have done and why. I read them truly. And if stories like this help you feel less alone, I hope you will stay with me because sometimes the strongest thing a woman can do is stop carrying what was never treated as hers.